Hey everybody, happy Monday. It is the 28th of September. It is 5 o'clock Eastern time, which is New York City time. Hopefully you guys all found that time zone converter. I always try to include that when I'm telling you guys about a Facebook Live. That way, you can just double check the times and make sure when we are going to be going live in your time zone. And actually keep in mind that in about a month, October 31st in the US, it will be the end of daylight savings time. November 1st, we are going back into standard time. So at that point, I am not sure if other countries go on the same timetable. Some countries never even go into daylight savings time. So then it's going to be especially important to use that time zone converter whenever we do a Facebook Live so that you always know exactly what time we are going to be on. So today we released block number 1 for the FaLaLa sew along, and lots of you have already posted your blocks. So I know that a lot of you have really been anxious to get started. Last week was actually the kickoff week. Last week was the first week, and if you remember, we released all of the embroidery patterns, and I did that so that since it was going to be 1 block per week, I didn't want you to get behind on the embroidery and not be able to keep up with the piecing of the blocks. So last week you got all of those embroidery patterns, and I know a lot of you finished the embroidery last week, so you are all caught up and ready to go. If you purchased the pre-printed panels, of course you didn't have to do any embroidery at all. Today I'm going to make a sample block, and I'm actually going to be using a little novelty fabric, so you can see how to use a novelty fabric as well. So before we get started on this block, because I want to give people a little bit of time to jump in just in case they're looking for us or something like that, I thought since we're talking about Christmas, I would show you a little preview of an upcoming project we have for the Art of Home Club. Now, the Art of Home Club is our membership where you can join for $10.95 a month and get tons and tons of patterns. We get club exclusive patterns every single month. Next month, yes, October, our pattern is going to be called Gnome for the Holidays. Now here's the funny thing. A couple years ago, gnomes were super popular. I saw them everywhere, and then they kind of died out. And to be honest, I was never really a gnome fan. I thought a lot of them were sort of like creepy looking. I didn't really think they were cute. And then this summer, I started seeing ads for Christmas merchandise, and the gnomes were back like crazy. And so I was like, okay, gnomes are back, or they never went out of style. I'm not sure. So I did a little poll in our Facebook group with our club members and asked them if they like gnomes. And about 90% of people said that they liked or loved gnomes. And I was really surprised because I wasn't too sure about the gnome thing. So I was like, okay, everybody in the club seems to like gnomes, or most people do, so we will do a collection with gnomes. Now, one thing you should know about the club is that we always give you a lot of options for making a project. So a project might call for like 4 different applique blocks or embroidered blocks, and I'll give you like 6 or 8 blocks to choose from. So if you don't like a particular one, or if you really like a different one, you can choose the ones that you use. So for this collection coming up in October for the club called Gnome for the Holidays, I did plenty of versions that don't have any gnomes in them. So if you don't like gnomes, if you're in the no gnome camp, you can do a non-gnome project. Say that 10 times. Non-gnome project. So like, for example, here's one with my little gnome girl. This is just one of the quick projects. It's just a little mug rug with my little gnome girl. I don't know if you can see, I added some little buttons on there. I think that's really cute. But if you don't want to do gnomes, we've got things like little house and a Christmas tree, and we've got a block that says Gnome for the Holidays, and then we've got another one that says Home for the Holidays. Gnome is where the heart is, and home is where the heart is. So even if you don't like gnomes, you will be able to do these projects and make really cute projects without gnomes, or you can do them with the gnomes. So again, be looking for the Art of Home Club is going to be opening to new members in a few weeks, around mid-October. We only open up to new members 3, maybe 4 times a year, depending on the year. That's just so that we can kind of get you all in, get you acclimated, help you to figure out how to navigate around our members-only website. So that is something to look forward to for October. So in the description to this video, I have put the link to the waiting list. And if you get on the waiting list, if you think you might be interested in the club, even just a little bit, make sure you get on that waiting list, because only people on the waiting list get an offer to get like extra bonuses and free patterns and stuff that just the regular public, we don't advertise that to. So if you think you might be interested, even in the slightest, get on that waiting list so that you find out about all the bonuses when we open up to new members in the middle of October. So all that being said, let's get started on our block number 1. So this is block number 1, and it looks kind of puffy because I've got all the edges folded together because I've got my whole table runner put together. And I only wanted to show you block number 1 for now. So there's that one. This is the holiday version with FaLaLa written on it, and it had like the holly leaves and the wreath on it. That's what this panel is. And then this is a version, this has actually already been not only put together but quilted. So this one's like super puffy, but this was the Christmas one. Okay, and it's already quilted, really, really cute quilting by my friend Catherine Taylor. So that's what our block is going to look like. And so we're going to get started on that in a minute. Now, just to answer a couple of questions, somebody had asked earlier today about the 4.5-inch squares. So the table runner has 4 blocks, and each block has a little square in the middle. That 4.5-inch square is going to go to the middle. So 4 blocks, 4.5-inch squares. So, you know, you've got your panel. If you purchase the panel, one of these, 1 square for each block. If you're doing the embroidery, you'll notice if you did like the Christmas version, there will be 4 different embroidery patterns for the Christmas version, or if you're doing the holiday version, there will be 4 different patterns for the holiday version. So that's how that works. Now, if you'll notice, I printed out the instructions. This is what it's going to look like when you get your PDF and you print it out. And you'll notice that it says you will need white 6-inch square for embroidery, or a 4.5-inch square if not doing embroidery. So the reason it says 6 inches for embroidery is, remember, when you're doing embroidery, go back to last week's Facebook Live if you didn't see that, because we talked about this. You need a little bit of extra around the block to go into your hoop and to kind of trim it up, because once you get done the embroidery, it can get kind of like wonky, like stretched out a little bit. So, so that's why if you're going to do the embroidery, you're going to start with a 6-inch square. If you're not doing embroidery, so if you start with a 6-inch square for embroidery, you trim it down to 4.5. So if you're not doing that, you just start with a 4.5-inch square. Does that make sense? So the little panels that you could buy, these were optional. These trimmed down to, you know, 4.5 inches. Now, if you don't want to do the embroidery or the panel, what you could do is use like a novelty fabric. So here's a 4.5-inch square. This is going to go in the center of my block in place of this. Okay, so you could use a novelty fabric. If you want to do a different version, like if you did this right now in like gold and burgundy and brown, that would be really pretty for fall. And just use like a really a pretty novelty fabric in the middle and make a fall table runner, or do one for spring and use like pastel colors. So don't be limited just to the Christmas designs. Just find a cute fabric that you want for the middle and cut your center 4.5-inch square, and you are good to go. So also for this block, we are going to need, let's see, 4 4.5-inch squares, which I have here. And we're going to need 2 light green squares, which are 5 1/8. And we're going to need 2 more dark green squares, which are 5 1/8. So today, what we're going to be concentrating on is how to make a half square triangle unit, or an HST. They are really pretty standard in quilt making. If you know how to make an HST, there are like 1,000 different blocks that you can make with just squares and HSTs. So it's a basic building block of making a quilt. So once you get this down, making HSTs, you're going to be able to make tons and tons of different kinds of quilts. So the first thing I want to do, and I'm just going to refer to my instructions here. So if you printed these out, you might want to refer to these too. The first thing I want to do is take my 2 light green 5 1/8-inch squares, and I think we're going to want the camera down here on the table if we can. What we're going to be doing is sewing diagonally on these squares, and there's a couple different ways you can do this. You have to mark a line. Now I'm using a friction pen. just because I like that it irons out when I'm done. You can use a pencil, you could use a chalk pencil, anything that's kind of light that won't go through to the front, because you're going to be marking on the back, will be fine for this. Don't use like a heavy permanent marker that can bleed through to the front or anything like that. So you've got two options. The first thing you could do is just use a regular ruler and draw a line down the center diagonally. The other thing you can do, and this is my favorite way to do it, this is a 1/4 inch seam allowance marker. And I have these for sale on my website. The link is in the description. So with this, what you will do is, see the yellow line?
Hold it down. There. Yeah.
Right there?
Yep.
Okay. So you can see the yellow line. What I'm going to do is line up that yellow line with the corners of my square. Okay, so I've got those lines marked up with the corners. And then I actually draw on either side of this. Because what we're going to be doing is sewing twice down the center of this square. And I'll show you what I mean in just a second. Okay, so two different ways of marking your square. So the next thing I'm going to do is I want to sew a 1/4 inch away from this line. So if I've just marked one line down the center, I'm just going to run this through the machine using the marker on my foot or on the needle plate of my machine and sew a 1/4 inch away from this line. You could also go back if you wanted to with a ruler and mark that 1/4 inch, that line 1/4 inch away from the center again if you wanted to. This is what it's going to look like when I sew. Now normally I would recommend that you use a matching thread or a neutral thread, but I used red so that you could see it better. So here you can see for this one I had drawn my two lines with my 1/4 inch seam marker, and then I sewed right on the lines. So either way you do it is fine. This is my preferred method. So then what you're going to do is once you draw your lines, you're going to put that right sides together with your dark green square. And you can pin it. You don't have to pin it. A pin or two never hurt anybody. All right, so this would go right sides together with the dark green squares, and that's when you sew it on those lines. Okay, so then you're sewing twice your dark green to your light green square. And can you see kind of what we're going to end up with here? Okay, now the next thing you're going to do is cut down the center of these two sewn lines. So these lines are a 1/2 inch apart. If I cut down the center, that's going to give me a 1/4 inch seam allowance on each side. So there's two different ways you can do that. You can use a ruler and a rotary cutter and just cut down the center. I actually like to just use regular old sewing scissors and just carefully cut right down the center. And if I'm doing like a big project with a whole lot of HSTs, this was one of those projects that I'll just at night, I'll sit in front of the TV with my scissors and my pile of squares and just sit there and cut them all apart at one time. So now I've got these cut apart, 1/4 inch seam allowance automatically on each side. When you open it up, you get this half square triangle unit or HST, and you're going to want to press it. A lot of times the instructions in a pattern will tell you how to press it. For this particular block, we are going to press to the dark green. Okay. Sometimes I have you press them open. It kind of depends on where it's going to be in a quilt and how many seams you're going to have coming together. So for this one I pressed to the dark green, and now what I want to do is trim it, because what I need is 4.5 inch squares. So if you look at your printed out pattern, it says right here, trim to 4.5 inches. All right, so 2 light green squares and 2 dark green squares are going to yield a total of 4 of these units. So now what I want to do is just show you how to trim them. So the most important thing when you're trimming these is to use your 45-degree line on your cutting mat. And you don't need any kind of special rulers for this. Just a regular old cutting mat and a regular ruler will work just fine. So, okay. So what I want to do, take that diagonal line, line it up exactly on that 45-degree line, and what I want to do is have these edges just a hair over the lines, because that's where I'm going to trim. You can see how, even if you're really careful with your cutting and your sewing, my square isn't exactly square. I like exactly perfect squares whenever possible when I'm doing quilting. So that's why I like this method for trimming them down and getting a perfect HST every time. So again, I'm going to line up the seam on the diagonal line, and I have this edge just a tiny bit, like maybe 1/8 of an inch over this cutting line here. All right, and so what I'm going to do, I'm going to put my ruler on there. I'm going to trim. Okay, and then I'm going to put my ruler on this line and trim right on the line. You see, I'm just trimming away just a tiny bit because that's all I need to do to get that side of the square straightened up. Now, you'll see, since I had my seam right on that line, look how perfect that point is. Okay, but now I need this 4.5 inches, and we are a little bit over 4.5 inches. If I count from 5, I've got like 9 5/8 probably instead of a 1/2 inch. So I'm just now going to cut the other two sides. So I cut this side and this side. Now I'm going to come back and cut this side. All right, so I'm going to put my ruler on the 1/2 inch mark since I want this to be 1, 2, 3, 4.5 inches. I'm going to trim that there. And then I'm going to do the same thing going this way. This is the last edge that I haven't cut yet. So I'm going to put my ruler right on that 1/2 inch mark. 1, 2, 3, 4.5. Okay, look how perfect that is. It is perfectly square. My seam lines are exactly in the corners. So that is how I like to make my HSTs. Now there's also in the video description, we have a link to our half square triangle cheat sheet. You can print this out. And this is so that just about any size HST you're making, you can make it a little bit big so that you can trim it down. Or if you don't want to do the trimming part and you want to make it so that it comes out to be exactly the size that you need it to be at the end, that's also included on this chart. So go ahead, click on that link and download this PDF for the half square triangle cheat sheet. So now I'm not going to sew these blocks together, but I'm going to just show you how this is going to come together, what this block would look like if I was putting it together. And it's really easy. I mean, just refer to the picture on your pattern. Now remember, on the pattern, this is shown as white because this might be an embroidered or a pre-printed panel. But remember, I'm using a novelty here. So my reds went here, kind of like make a cross or a plus sign. And then I've got my light green triangles. Well, I didn't trim this one yet, so this one isn't exactly right. Going this way, and, well, these didn't get trimmed either. So I'm just going to kind of, that would go like that, and that would go like that. So not a perfect representation, but I mean, you see how these are going to go together. Okay, and that is what our first block is going to look like. Okay, so do we have any questions?
Someone asked about the ruler.
Okay, the quarter inch.
What's it called?
This is the 1/4 inch seam marker. And the package actually has 2 sizes. This is the long one. It also has a shorter one in the same package for if you're doing smaller.
We have a link for that.
Yes, there's a link in the description.
Since cutting down to 4.5 inches, can you make it 5 or 6 inches instead of 5 1/4?
To start,
Yeah.
is that what they're asking?
I guess so.
You could. I mean, you could cut them bigger than 5 1/8 to start your green and your light green and your dark green squares. Just remember, you're going to have more waste that way. I usually give you enough that you're going to have you're going to end up with a square. Your square is going to be about 1/4 of an inch bigger than what you need it to be. If you feel like you want to have a little more leeway to trim off and make sure that you get it exactly right, that's fine. You can cut your beginning squares a little bit bigger than your 5 1/8. But you will have to trim off more, so you'll be wasting more fabric that way.
Okay. I'm not there's any more questions. I'm going to see if anyone else has any.
Okay.
I'll move the camera.
Okay, so just to reiterate, we're doing the FaLaLa Sew Along. The blocks come out on Mondays. So today was week 2, block 1, because week 1 was the embroidery pattern, so we're on week 2. So we're on block 1, then we're going to have block 2, block 3, block 4, and then at the end we will have the borders, which will be the finishing instructions. I put them on the website Monday mornings, Eastern time, usually like 9 or 10 o'clock, depending on when we get things ready to go. Some days are busier than others. Remember, if you sign up for that email list, you're going to get the reminder email. And there's a link in the reminder email. However, if for some reason you don't get that email, you can always just go to that page. I think it's jacquelinesteves.com/FaLaLa. And the links are actually on that page. So if for some reason you lost the email or something, just go to that page and you can get the patterns right there. Any other questions before we sign off for today?
I don't see any.
No? Okay, well, as I said, I saw a lot of you posting pictures of your blocks, so I know that a lot of you have been working on them. Maybe some of you are getting ready to work on them tonight or this weekend. So I hope this has inspired you to get going on that block. Again, remember, if you have fun making this block, go and pull out some other fabrics and make a few more blocks, maybe in different color combinations to give away as gifts. Because I always say, if you're making like 1 table runner, you might as well make 2. And if you're making 2, you might as well make 3. And if you're making 3, you might as well make a half dozen. And then, because you're doing the same thing over and over again, you kind of get into a groove. Things go faster that way. And if you do that, you can end up with a nice pile of little gifts to give away for this holiday season. So that's just a little idea of something you could do with this project. So I think that's all we had for today. Is that it? No more questions? Okay. All right. Well, have fun. Have a great evening wherever you are. Have fun sewing, and I will talk to you later. Bye-bye.